to get to our professor of politics and history at Catawba College, Dr. Michael Bitzer, who has joined us before. Dr. Bitzer, thank you so much for your time. I do know that you authored a book about NC gerrymandering called Redistricting and Gerrymandering in North Carolina, Battle Lines in the Tar Heel State. We're seeing battle lines drawn all across America right now, sir. In Texas, obviously the news in California that we've been covering here on WCNC Plus with ICE activity outside, just some crazy images. And honestly, Dr. Bitzer, how did we get here? Because we're having a mid-decade redistricting issue. Obviously, here in North Carolina, there's a subject of some issue. The current maps drawn by the Republican-controlled General Assembly in 2023 are still at the center of ongoing lawsuits. And in fact, just in June, I do believe, if you want to correct me, there has not been, there was a hearing in June, but we have not had a final decision as of August 7th on those maps. So just update us where we're at, if that's correct, and what the next step looks like for us here in North Carolina.
A pattern of, I would say, mad, mutually assured destruction based on partisan redistricting. If Texas is going to pursue this, California is going to pursue it. We could potentially see a state like Missouri and New York also engage in this. So this is really going into a midterm election year for 2026 that typically the president's party loses seats in Congress. That is a kind of given rule in American politics. But the margins are so narrow, in particularly the U.S. House of Representatives, that Donald Trump is trying to do his best to ensure that Republicans at least have an attempt to claim a majority in next year's elections. Thus, he issued the command to Texas. I'm not sure that we will necessarily see something here in North Carolina. Again, North Carolina's partisan redistricting, the partisan gerrymandering, is legal based on a state Supreme Court decision that overturned a previous decision saying partisan gerrymandering was unconstitutional. The cases, however, deal with racial gerrymandering, the drawing of lines to impact voters potentially on race. And we've got a number of cases coming from other states going up to the U.S. Supreme Court that could potentially have an impact on this case here in North Carolina and ultimately could strike at the heart of the Voting Rights Act of 1965 that really kind of governs how racial dynamics in redistricting play themselves out.
There are a lot of big things in there. I mean, obviously, the Voting Rights Act, something that we've known about, obviously, for decades. And so many Americans obviously want to have their voices heard. This is what this is about, getting those votes heard. And really, as you said, having the majority swing one way or the other. I got to ask, Dr. Bitzer, is this the new norm in American politics, do you think?
We are absolutely in the new norm, and we are in an environment that is both nationalized and polarized. Everybody knows about polarized politics. The two parties cannot get along. There's very little common ground between them. And in fact, the voters have also become highly partisan and highly polarized because we are now living in like-minded communities, and so many of the precincts that become the building blocks of these legislative districts, congressional districts, are indeed so heavily slanted to one party over the other because the voters are slanted so heavily to one party over the other. But there's also the nationalization effect. We used to talk about in the 1980s, all politics is local, that elected leaders, particularly members of Congress, want to take care of the folks back home, even if they didn't vote for them. Nowadays, it is nationalized dynamics. All politics is nationalized. What happens in D.C. is driven through the states, even down to the local levels. So this is the new American politics that we're in. Nationalized, divided, highly polarized, and these are just symptoms of these kind of phenomenon going on in American politics.
So, in layman terms, Dr. Bitzer, I'm still trying to understand a little bit what is ahead for North Carolina. So, for our viewers, let's say the decision lands, and these are constitutional maps that have been drawn. Do you see us getting into a predicament? I mean, at that point, who knows where we're at, right? We could be in 2026 by that time, and nearing the midterms. Do you think that there would be a chance then that redistricting could be coming back up, that maps could be redrawn on either side, or is that not even a potential that you're thinking of?
I think right now we have to kind of wait and see how the rest of the country plays out. If indeed Texas goes through their process and California goes through theirs, and then Missouri and New York goes through their, national Republicans may look at North Carolina and say, hey, you've got a couple of Democratic seats that could be potentially split up and allow us Republicans to gain a few more seats out of North Carolina. They've already got a 10-4 advantage, primarily by packing Democrats into places like Charlotte and Raleigh and Durham. There is a process that could potentially crack all of those Democrats in those concentrated central cities and splinter them among various other districts that extend out into, say, suburban North Carolina, into rural North Carolina. That could eliminate some Democrats here in North Carolina as well. So I think we need to see what the national dynamics play out. And if indeed everybody is going to a mutually assured destruction, maybe North Carolina gets looked at by national Republicans and say, it's time for y'all to take out some Democrats to combat what New York and potentially California are doing as well.
Yeah, this whole situation seems unprecedented, in my opinion. I mean, we have state elected officials who are leaving the state of Texas. I'm not going to comment bad or good, but obviously they have a reason to do so. We have Republicans in the state calling them to come back to finish their jobs. I mean, this is I don't know if we have a historical precedent where we've seen state representatives leaving the state to protest these type of issues. Have you ever seen anything like this?
We actually have, and out of Texas as well. I mean, Texas has had a kind of past history of redistricting in the middle of the decade. This is very much out of the norm because most of states tend to do it right after the census in a year that ends in zero. They redistrict in year one, they change the maps, they get the populations equalized, and then they also kind of look at doing the partisan breakdown. What we are seeing out of Texas is, basically politics at raw play. And we've seen that happen in the 1990s. Texas has done this before. Texas Democrats have left the state and tried to hold up redistricting sessions. But this is really something that, we have not seen other states take into advantage. So we'll have to kind of wait and see how California plays itself out, as well as potentially other states.
Sorry to show my ignorance there. I was trying to rack my brain to think if it's happened again, but I appreciate you letting us know and being so kind with that. Doctor, I got to ask this because a lot of folks, and I'm thinking about this as well. And I live in South Carolina, so it's a little different for me. But anyway, right, we're on the precipice of a huge, midterm election. Obviously, we'll see what happens in November if and when California can get their ducks in a row to get that special election had. But anyway, here in North Carolina, I'm sure people are wondering, right, how their voice can be heard with gerrymandering. And I don't want to say necessarily the maps are already like that, but for the maps that we are looking at in North Carolina, should folks be worried about their voice being heard with gerrymandering at play?
Well, certainly what gerrymandering does is basically isolate the minority party, the party that's out of power, so that they don't have a voice. And we typically tend to see that with this redistricting kind of an effort going on. Here in North Carolina, our previous congressional delegation was a 7-7 split. That was court ordered. But once that decision that reversed the partisan gerrymandering as unconstitutional went into effect, Republicans were able to redraw the maps and basically create 3 additional Republican seats out of those 7 Democratic seats. Could they do more? There is a very distinct possibility that that could happen. You said you were from South Carolina. I've heard discussions about potentially drawing the last Democratic congressman out of his district and making it a more favorable Republican district as well. All of this is based on geographic polarization, and so much of this is based on where the lines are. For here in North Carolina, Democrats have to be concerned because if you're talking about potentially getting rid of 2, maybe 3 other Democratic seats, you're talking about a real shift in Republican congressional control of North Carolina to the Republicans at the detriment of Democratic voters.
Yeah, it is. It is the wild, wild west in some respects in terms of politics right now. Dr. Bitzer, you covered so many things. Appreciate you being a good sport and fielding all those open-ended questions. Last thing for me is, what else am I missing here? You're the expert. What should they know? And I know, the foreseeable future may not be totally clear for a lot of us, but anything else that comes to mind?
Yeah, I think we'll just have to kind of wait and see. It sounds like Texas Democrats are going to return to Austin because they got the guarantee that California Democrats would start their redistricting process. That could be a potential hurdle in California because they have to overturn a state constitutional amendment that instituted an independent redistricting commission, something that's supposed to take partisanship out of the process of redistricting. California Democrats want to put that back in, put in partisanship back into the process. That's going to require a vote by California voters to do that. But if California is as Democratic as Texas is Republican, that could be a real potential likelihood of that process playing out. Then the dominoes really start to fall across the United States, and we'll just have to wait and see how things play out.
I did. You brought up a great point. Just last thing here. In what likelihood is it? And I think I saw from the federal government level that somebody is, I don't exactly remember, the representative is trying to institute legislation where they do keep to the regular mandated every 10-year type of redistricting with the census. Is there any possibility that that will stay the same? Because as we can see, the competitive advantage is gaining some seats here and there in any state that you can get them. But do we go back to as we were, do you think? Is there any possibility of that happening?
Well, Congress can certainly step in and they can do their part to basically tell the states, whoa, no more mid-decade redistricting efforts and put a stop to it. Unfortunately, that particular piece of legislation was proposed by a Republican, and it would also have to get through a very narrow U.S. Senate in order to get legislation passed. And then it would have to go to President Trump, who basically, by my read, doesn't want not to have a mid-decade redistricting effort, but wants to ensure that seats are built for Republicans out of Texas. This is really, a kind of war games scenario where if one side moves their chess piece, the other side is going to move their chess piece, and ultimately both sides may suffer in Armageddon.
And it feels like us, the voters, are in the middle of all of it. So, yeah, I guess for better or for worse, I guess we'll see. Dr. Bitzer, a professor from Catawba College, we certainly appreciate your time, sir. And again, wrote the book, NC Gerrymandering, Redistricting and Gerrymandering in North Carolina, Battle Lines in the Tar Heel State. Check it out. And Dr. Bitzer, thank you for your time. It's always great to talk to you and to have an expert advice here on WCNC Plus.
Thank you for the opportunity.